Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on. So we've talked about safety, but we've also talked about log selection, how you're going to cut a log, how you're going to measure a log, how you're going to scale the lumber, how you're going to dry the lumber, how you're going to finish the lumber, how you're going to sell it, kind of. So you have a lot of stuff to think about. And I actually named this talk considerations because it's a lot of information you need to process and turn into something. And AI could maybe do this, but probably not. So this is, at least the person making these decisions will probably always have flesh. So that's cool. Anywho, if you look at this pile, there's a nice clean end, but it's got a sweep bend to it. Here's a big old hollow and crack. Here's a branch on there. Ring shake and a crack. Some big nubs. Who knows what's going on with that one? More cracked hollow. What am I going to do with this load of wood? Firewood, right? No, no, no. This is black locust. I have a market for black locust in any shape and form. So I'm taking it home no matter what and going through every single log and turning it into something cool. That's how I work. So, but you got to think about other stuff too. It's not just what you're doing with this log. How are you getting the log home? What are you doing with the log? Do you have 5 logs, 10 logs, 100 logs, 200 logs? Log storage is super important. I used to just put it in the same pile, and then if I needed oak or pine, I'd have to pick through the whole pile, and it would spend a whole day moving logs around. Now, everything, I call it my logarithm, it's all sorted by species and size. So if I need pine, it's right there. If I need oak, it's over there. If I need 10-foot oak, it's actually over there. And that saved me so much time and headache. And now I can go back through my inventories and keep a continuing inventory, which is great. It's efficiencies, Log handling. Who's got a loader big enough to pick up a 5,000-pound log? Yeah, right? A couple of us. If you're bringing home 5,000-pound logs, you probably want to be able to move it. Made that mistake before I got my big loader. Now what do? You use your cant hook and roll it around and just hope you don't get crushed or throw your back out. Stupid. So now we cut them into smaller chunks if they're too heavy for us. And that's just how we do it. Let's see the mill flow. So you have your log input comes in, and it's got to go through the grading phase probably, then get sawed, and then that sawed lumber has to go somewhere, and then that has to go to a kiln or something, then that has to go get processed, and then that has to go on a truck to get delivered. Maybe there's a wood shop in there. And so if it's all the same space, well, that's inefficient, right? You're constantly resetting the space. And so you just need to factor that into your planning. Because if you have to move everything 10 times, that's a lot of labor. Maybe that's on purpose, but you got to think about this. And then when the wood's cut, how are you going to move it around? You got a forklift? Are you going to move it on pallets? Are you going to pick up every single piece by hand over and over and over and over and over again? If you like to work out, that's the method for you. And then how are you going to truck it? So we kind of talked about this. Everyone's got a different way to move logs and lumber. The traditional way would be like a log truck and a forklift or like a big front end loader. Everyone's got a different thing. And so it's, what do you want to spend more money on? Sawmill, kiln, moving a log around, hauling a log? You got to think about that because they all cost an awful lot of money to buy and to upkeep. And then your production line here. We talked about this sort of. Okay, and then no, you got all this lumber. So you got excited. You go home today and you order a sawmill on the internets, and it comes next week. You got all these logs. You cut all this wood. What are you going to do with all this wood? You got more logs coming in. Ah, cool. Cut some more wood. Uh-oh. Now you have a lot of wood. And it just keeps happening. Years go by. Now you have this mountain of sawed lumber, but nowhere for it to go. It's nice to have somewhere for it to go. So if you're being really responsible, you know where it's going to go before you bring the log home. And you have this thing planned out. Otherwise, you end up like me, and you got mountains of logs and mountains of sawed lumber that's got no home. And it's just sad because it's sitting there lonely. Nice to have somewhere for it to go. Luckily, for all of us, there's places to take it. So the Habitat for Humanity will accept sawed lumber. Usually there's some caveats there, but they'll take it. It's free. You got to give it to them. But that's a feel-gooder. You can also give it to like shop classes at high schools or like continuing education courses and stuff. Or you can give it to your cool neighbor or even the neighbor you don't like. You give them the stuff that's... Anyway, you got stuff you can do with it. There's a whole nother level of people, not just cabinet makers and table makers. There's like artists finish carpenters. There's, the list is actually super long. The people that use wood, good carvers, you know, you can always find someone that'll take your piece of wood. Doesn't matter how big or small it is. Like we got all these weird cuts in here. All these pieces have a home. They're going somewhere, you know. So I like to carve spoons. Spoons are an amazing holiday gift or birthday gift. Everyone's sick of getting my spoons, but I give them a different spoon every time, you know. So just something to think about. If you're like a municipality or you're like me and you live on a county road, noise barriers. You can, you see them on the freeways. They have these huge fence walls. You can make that out of lumber all you want. 3 or 4 inch thick will last a long, long time and be very insulative. It'll work fantastic. Fences, yeah, fences aren't structural necessarily, so you can use non-structural grade for a lot of that. You got planters, treasure chests. There's all sorts of things you can do. I like benches, picnic tables. I have some clients that order 15 by 15 inch by like 16-foot long giant beams, and they use those as benches. And they look super cool, and they're not blowing away. No one can steal them, and it might use a log that I wouldn't use otherwise. So it's a nice way to use stuff I'm not using. But if you're going to start using it for stuff, you need to make sure you're using it to code. So structural lumber, like everything building houses that like holds the house up or a wall up or something, has to have a grade stamp. And it's got to be an appropriate grade stamp. And every ordinance in every municipality, every county, every state's different. So you definitely want to know what you're doing so you don't have to redo it. Or it might cost you a lot of money to rebuild a house. So just pay attention to that. The nice thing about urban wood is usually it's arty. And so like cutting boards don't have a standard, So a lot of the stuff we would actually use urban wood for doesn't really apply to this. So why are you cutting wood? That's an important thing to think about with all of this. Are you cutting wood just for funsies? Are you trying to make money? What's the story there, right? Here's maybe you have a buddy whose tree died from something or other, had to get cut down, and they want something to remember it by. Maybe they're building a sauna or some bookshelves or something. That's a great purpose for it because it keeps the story going, and the story is what's important for these people. So they could go to the big box store and buy a piece of wood, but they want that piece of wood because they have a connection to it and a story. A family member planted it, their dog's buried underneath it. It could be a lot of things, but I think that's the most important thing about urban wood is the connection, because you're never going to compete with true traditional forestry stuff, never. And so, story. Yep, there's your market. Find someone that wants to use it for a purpose. Space. You'll easily, very quickly outgrow your space. Guaranteed, 100%, right? Yep. And so think about that. Always get more than you think you need. Always get a bigger piece of equipment than you think you need. The story continues. Zoning. Some cities have specific ordinances against sawmilling. So probably check your code so you don't get kicked out. How many cities have I been kicked out of? Who wants to guess? 5? Well, at least one. Well, 5's pretty good. I've ran away from 5, but I got kicked out. I used to live in Minneapolis and they kicked me out. So they don't have an ordinance against it. Your neighbors hate it because it's loud and dusty. And your neighbors will call and complain over and over until eventually the city says, And so think about that. Oh, some important things you might not think about. I'm going to use a pointing stick that's gentle. Bathrooms and water. It's hot out, you're sweaty, stuff gets dirty. You got to go to the bathroom now. You don't want to have to drive to the gas station or something. Having that on site's huge. It'll make a difference. Conveniently, I'll show you a way later how to make your own bathroom. Anyways. Do you need logs? Are you going to run out of logs? Do you have the right logs? You probably want to do that before you sell a huge contract because it's really hard to find certain logs. I'll give you an example. I need a bunch of locust. My logs are all cracked and I got a contract. I'm kind of getting nervous. Am I going to get enough logs in time to deliver? Yes, I am. But I'm nervous about it. sold too much, went above my means. How are you going to move them logs? Are you going to move them one at a time? Or are you going to move 6 at a time? I'm into 6, you know. They're heavy too. Your labor pool might change, likely changes. Sawmill work is laborious, it's dangerous, and people learn the skill and the craft, and then they go do it themselves. So it's a constant turnover type of industry, at least in the urban world. And you need someone that likes to debark logs. That's pretty handy. You got to think about biosecurity. Are you bringing home infested or diseased logs? How are you going to handle that? What happens if you cause an outbreak in your area? Probably should figure that out before you bring home anything that you shouldn't be bringing home. Just stuff to think about. How are you going to truck it? I have a dump trailer. That's why I've been moving wood for a long time. You know what's really annoying about dump trailers? You can't load them with pallet forks. You have to hand load and unload every single piece. I've gotten smarter. Now I sling pallet loads and I pick it up over the side with my forks. But it took me a while to figure that out. And anywho, there's an easy way to move wood and a hard way. You can choose your pain. So you got to think about all this. Plus, add in Minnesota. Your weather's going to change. Your yard's going to get muddy. It's going to get full of snow and ice. Your piles are going to freeze. Your logs are going to freeze together. All sorts of weird stuff's going to happen. And so you need to think about that. And I'm big into the whole measure twice, cut once thing. You know, plan out what could go wrong, and then don't let it happen kind of a thing. Plan out your yard and your log supply and everything well ahead of time so you don't have to do it later. This will save you an awful lot. And planning's kind of fun because we have YouTube now. So you can like watch everyone else's horror stories or what's worked for them. So that's handy.